Hi, I'm Jamey, the designer of Scythe, a 4X board game set in an alternate history 1920s Europe, Eastern Europe, in a world designed by Jacob Rolzowski, who also illustrates the game. I just wanted to give a very brief overview of Scythe to those of you who are just learning about the game for the first time. In Scythe, each player is represented on the board by a character and their animal companion who are sent on a mission by the leaders of their faction to explore this world of Scythe, which is in a little patch of land in Eastern Europe that's kind of gone not unnoticed but unclaimed for a while because it's been previously occupied by a factory that has built these monstrous mechs that have fueled the first Great War in Europe. The war is over and the factory has closed its doors, and so all of these different factions have taken an interest in this patch of land that wasn't previously occupied by anything other than the factory. So inside the general arc of the game is that you are kind of building up some infrastructure, then exploring the land, then usually having some sort of interaction with the other players, usually combat or claiming territory, and then finishing off the things that you started to build earlier in the game to kind of establish your foothold in this new land. That ties into the goals of the game. There are no rounds in Scythe. Players just take turns until the game ends. And the game ends when a player has placed 6 stars. The stars are representative of different goals and achievements you're trying to accomplish. Like I mentioned, you're trying to complete different things in the game. You're trying to build all 4 of your mechs, or you're trying to build all 4 of your structures, or produce and hire all 8 of your workers. So you're kind of maximizing or maxing out the different things that you can do inside. You can also get a few stars from combat. You can get them from completing objective cards, from becoming really popular, achieving the highest popularity level with the people in this new land, and achieving the highest power level. So if you're viewed as really powerful, that's a goal you can accomplish. Once someone places their 6th star, the game immediately ends, and you count up points at the end of the game. The 3 ways you score inside at the end. Points are actually coins in this game. You're trying to amass the greatest fortune. And you'll score based on the number of territories you control, the number of resources you control. For every 3 resources you control, you'll score. And for every star that you place during the game. So there's an incentive to move the game along, to place more stars than other players because they score, you gain coins for them at the end of the game. And the amount of coins you gain for each of those 3 categories is dependent on how popular you are. So if you're really popular at the end of the game, you're going to score more points for those categories. But if during the game you focused on other things, maybe not becoming popular, but having the most territory or placing the most stars, you can still win the game. One of the core concepts inside is the idea of territorial control and the resources on the board. Inside, you control each territory. Territories are hexes on the board. You can see a miniature version of the board here. You control a territory if you have a worker there, a character there, a mech there, or a structure that isn't occupied by another player's unit, another player's character, worker, or mech. And one of the unique elements of Scythe is that your resources are kept on the board. So the resources inside are wood, oil, metal, and food. And when you produce these resources, or when you trade for these resources, or when you gain them from having encounters with different people you'll encounter as you explore the board, you'll gain them on the hex on the board where you produce or where you traded for those resources. So you'll put the resource actually on the board, not off to the side on a player mat. And you'll be able to spend any resources on territories you control. But if you leave behind some resources and you no longer control the territory they're on, they're up for grabs from any player who comes into that territory. And in the same way, when you lose combat to another player, all of the resources on that territory remain there. So the winner of the combat not only wins the combat and claims the territory, but they also claim the resources on that territory. This is kind of to prevent players or to discourage players from stockpiling, because there are ways in the game that you can accumulate a lot of resources, and at the end of the game you'll score for those resources. But the more and more you stockpile, the more of a target you put on yourself for other players to come in and take those resources from you. The general flow of the game, as I mentioned, is that you'll take a turn and then you'll pass to the next player and they'll take their turn. And on your turn, you're going to have this player mat. Let me grab one real quick. You're going to have this player mat. This is a prototype version of it that has 4 different sections. And on your turn, you are going to take your player token and put it on a section that it wasn't already on. So if I had it on this section, I can choose from one of these 3 sections. And on my turn, I will take either one or both of the actions on that section. There's this top row of actions and there's this bottom row of actions. On my turn, so I'll take either one or both. I can take the top action, the bottom action, or both. And if I choose to take both of them, I have to take the top action first. And then I can decide if I still want to take the bottom action. Scythe is a game that's all about orders of operations. This is one of the things that I really love about games, where you're given a lot of choices, and you have to decide what order you're going to take them in. So inside, there are all these things you can do, like you can take upgrades, you can deploy mechs, you can build, you can enlist recruits, you can explore the land, and it's your job to decide what order you're going to do those things. And even within each of those actions, there's an order of operations. Like when you build mechs, you'll have 4 different mechs to choose from, and when you build that mech, it unlocks an ability for all of your mechs and your characters. So the order in which you unlock those abilities matters. If you unlock these 2 abilities first, it'll create a kind of a different strategy than if you unlock this ability and then this ability. And that goes for all of the different elements in the game. The order in which you unlock or create the different items, the recruits, the mechs, the structures, the upgrades, will impact the entire rest of the game for you. For newer players, it gives a lot of space to explore, and they won't really realize the impact of what they're doing until much later in the game. But they can visibly see the impact right away because the abilities are pretty self-explanatory. Last, there is combat in Scythe. Scythe is designed so that it kind of encourages players to have some combat with one another, but not to have only combat. And if you want, in smaller player games in particular, in 2 and 3 player games, if you're playing with people who don't enjoy fighting each other, Scythe is a game where you don't really have to. You can claim your territory and kind of try to spread out faster than the other players, similar to in a game like Terra Mystica, but you don't necessarily have to fight other players. But if you want to, if you enjoy that type of interaction, you can have combat. And the basic way that combat works, there's a resource called power inside that you'll spend, and whichever player spends more power on their little combat dial, and using little combat cards that they can secretly slip behind the dial to add to their total power. Based on that total power that they show to the other player, that determines who wins the combat. Attackers win ties, so there is an incentive for attackers to be the one to initiate combat, but defenders can still win. And inside, one of the cool things about it is that you can go into combat as the underdog. You can have a lot less power than the other player or fewer cards, but there's still this element of uncertainty because the player, you don't know how much power that player is going to spend, and that player doesn't know how much you're going to spend. So anyone can win the guessing game or the bluffing game in combat and come out the victor. That's a very brief overview of Scythe. I just wanted to kind of wrap around some of the bigger concepts of the game. Thank you for listening. If you have any questions, let me know in the comments. Thanks.